Hi, this is Colt Eastwood.
And this is Red Wolf Renegade.
And combined, we have over 1,000 hours in Starfield, and we really wanted to see its true potential.
And we know there was a ton of haters out there for Starfield, so if you came here to hate on Starfield with zero constructive criticism, then don't even bother commenting, because no one cares to hear your negativity.
Yeah, that's right, because we want to see Starfield get its Cyberpunk 2.0 moment. We're fans of both games and massive RPGs. I've put a ton of videos out on my channel as well as you, Red.
Yes, exactly. And now we know there are a ton of mods that address the categories that we're going to be jumping into. So yes, we know that they exist, but we are specifically talking about things that Bethesda can feasibly add into the game.
Yeah, and these are things that Bethesda could absolutely do without overhauling the games. And they're reasonable. We're going to break down why. Because like you've said, Red, on your channel, that Bethesda's been very quiet about the Starfield development, and what does that usually mean in your experience?
Last year, Bethesda went above and beyond, overhauling a lot of features when we just asked for simple fixes. So when Bethesda is being quiet like this, it usually means that they are putting their heads down, hunkering down, and doing a lot of major changes.
We're going to break down categories and different fixes and solutions in this video, show you what it could look like, and so much more.
So if you're new here and you love all things RPGs, Bethesda games, Starfield, consider leaving a like at the least and a sub at the most. Thank you so much.
Let's get into it.
In the most recent update for Starfield, we got some more support for creations, seemingly gearing up Starfield for the next big expansion, new creations, new mods. However, some players have dug deep into the data files and seemingly uncovered new data that interplanetary travel could finally be coming to Starfield. What is interplanetary travel? This means that you would, in theory, be able to seamlessly travel within star systems from planet to planet without loading screens. Think of No Man's Sky while you're in your ship looking at other planets, and you know that that's a tangible planet right in front of you. It will just take some time to get there. If you look at this gameplay here and imagine a similar thing with Starfield, this would alleviate that need for exploration in space. If Bethesda is planning on adding this option to the game, would it make you feel like you're traveling and exploring? Right now with Starfield, you pull up a scanner and select a planet and hit a button. You go into yet another loading screen that fades to black, and then boom, you're there. But interplanetary travel would be pointless if there weren't more things to explore in space, more derelict ships, running into enemies, more space stations, or space anomalies. One of the most important things about a space game is, the space part about it. It's that feeling that you're traveling through space instead of a point-and-click teleport option with a loading screen in between. Space is meant to feel like it's endless, and honestly, in Starfield, it sort of feels like when you fly up into space, you're just in this small pocket and you're not really moving anywhere. Again, No Man's Sky does such a great job with making you feel the scale of the universe while moving closer or farther away from different objects in space, whether it be space stations, other planets, or even massive ship fleets floating in space. There's a lot to be desired in this aspect, and it would be a huge game changer if Bethesda could pull this off to give us the sense of scale when it comes to moving through star systems.
One of the most controversial and the biggest complaints for Starfield are the loading screens. And Bethesda could fix some of the loading screens by hiding them behind transitions. And the most important one they could be working on right now without overhauling the loading and tile system of the planets is to make ground to space or space to ground animations more fluid. Currently, when you take off from a planet, you see a third-person animation as you head toward the stratosphere. Star Wars Outlaws does this really well, but you can only visit 4 or 5 different planets in that game. But what Ubisoft has done is hidden the loading screen behind a dissolve transition from the sky to outer space. And Starfield could do this by showing a longer animation of your ship in the sky and then cross-dissolve into space where you can take control again. Even if they recycle 2 or 3 different animations, this would help with seamless transitions and continuing immersion. And here's why. Starfield has less than 8 seconds when you take off until you have control in deep space. That loading time of 8 seconds would be enough to hide a loading screen into a transition. I think Bethesda could do this right now, and it would go a long way to holding immersion for players.
One of the biggest things that so many people had an issue with Starfield, even before its launch, were the massive empty planets. Now, my argument against that has always been, it's fair in the sense that this is space and there's billions of planets out there. Not every single one of them should have a massive city or settlements and structures and human inhabitants or alien life. I could go on, but you get the gist. However, in Starfield, it does break the immersion when you land on a fiery planet, you find a cryolab, for example, and you fall in love with the environments, the visual storytelling, new weapons, just to land on another ice planet 3 hours later and it's the exact same cryolab. There are a handful of randomized locations in Starfield, but if you are solely wanting to explore and find new things, the game could do with more randomized locations to throw into the cycle. And I'm talking about a lot more. Bethesda is a big enough team to continually add more randomized location into the mix to be randomized throughout the galaxy. And I'm not just talking about the man-made structures, but more locations, like I mentioned, caves, grottos, crash-landed ships, or even NPCs setting up a campsite on a planet. The possibilities are endless, but having more randomized locations added to the game and free updates over time would slowly make Starfield feel much more lived in and give you more reasons to explore.
If you want to upgrade your spacesuit, your weapons, or build your outpost, you need a ton of materials or crafting supplies, and Starfield has a system that allows you to reduce the weight of these items, but even with the system set at the most lenient, you will absolutely over-encumber yourself to fully load your cargo ship and your companions just to get enough supplies to upgrade your gear. Bethesda needs to overhaul the entire system and lower and reduce the weight of crafting and minerals needed to ease the progress of upgrading and building. Starfield is loaded with thousands of items to loot or equip, and one of the most surprising mechanics in the game is seeing outposts littered with hundreds of items that cannot be broken down into crafting materials. Bubble levels, staplers, impact drivers, duct tape, notepads, dozens and dozens of non-usable, lootable items that are worth just a handful of credits and will weigh down your character, and they cannot be broken into crafting components. In previous Bethesda games like Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, there is a big focus on upgrading your gear, your armor, your weapons, and building your outpost. And these items in the world can be broken down into crafting materials in Fallout and Skyrim. And this feeds into a gameplay loop of upgrading your gear, exploring out to find crafting materials, and upgrading your weapons and building things in the outpost, which in Bethesda's Starfield requires an insane amount of materials, and none of this junk you carry benefits you with credits or upgrading materials. If Bethesda passed through all of these meaningless items and broke them down to 2 or 3 different craftable materials or minerals, and even allowed you to break down components in the field, it could ease what has made Starfield a nearly unattainable system of fully upgrading your weapons, your spacesuit, or even building in an outpost.
We were off to a great start with different mission variety, with some transporting, surveys, bounty hunting, but when it came to other various activities that you would expect out of a space fantasy game, we are missing a lot of the fundamental things like smuggling or even contraband being worth smuggling. You could get put in jail for days and lose progress on your character simply for risking your life to make 1,000 credits just to make it back to the nearest black market to sell your stolen contraband. Bethesda began adding what I thought was going to be a new exciting faction with the Trackers Alliance. I play as a bounty hunter, and I was so happy when this got added. The initial missions that you were given are really great, and I was looking forward to more anti-hero focused factions like smugglers, space thieves, and what have you. Adding more variety to bounty hunting, for example, allowing us to take bounties alive and haul them back for an even bigger reward, taking bigger risks with big heist smuggling jobs. There is so much opportunity for more freedom with side quests and new factions. Imagine being able to roleplay as a ragtag smuggler like Han Solo and having that feeling of high risk, high reward with something like allowing you to rob the space station or adding more banks to the main settlements in Starfield, similar to how we see them in Aquila City and New Atlantis. I think what could help save the day a little bit is more of that dynamic, let me just go out and choose what I want to do without it being tied to a narrative for a quest.
Here is my outpost, some 300 hours of building, and these massive freight containers are fully loaded with crafting supplies, minerals, and gases, and there still is not enough to continue to build an outpost with a character well over level 60. And the outposts have been one of the most underwhelming segments of Starfield. For fans of the previous Fallout games and the expansions to Elder Scrolls, know that building your own homestead is such an important part of living in a world that Bethesda makes, and they've completely missed the ball with Starfield. The outpost system is very limited to what you can build, but most importantly, it is insanely impossible to gather and return enough materials to build what you want. And it's missing one of the most key components of custom building that makes it so satisfying that their own competitors like No Man's Sky, their own Fallout games, and nearly every other game in the survival genre, allowing you to build your own custom walls with or without windows, different roofs, fences, and all kinds of customizable component systems. In Starfield, you can only drop down 2 or 3 different habs and then add a few items to it. It is so limited, and it makes the whole gameplay loop system of gathering materials across the galaxy, going to different planets that are fairly empty to bring back minerals, only to find out your outpost will look just like everyone else's. The solution would be for Bethesda to allow us to use components of all of the different enemy and other faction building types, allowing us to put windows and walls and other components that make up the rest of the world. The outpost system is so limited, and if they provide everything that is built into the world, that would make outpost building much more satisfying.
One of my absolute favorite things to do in Starfield is build a ship. I have spent hours just in the ship creation menus, trying out new engines, putting new cockpits in, trying out new habs, and then you spend all this time and money, you think you're done with the ship, and then you walk outside and you realize you don't like anything in the interior. One thing that would alleviate all of this and allow you to be freer with your customization of your ship would be allowing us to preview the interiors of our ship while we are in the ship creation menu. This would save us time and in-game money without us having to load back a save just to try out new habs or going to the internet to look up screenshots of different ship habs or cockpits. Letting us customize our ship is one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in a space game similar to Starfield, but it does get hampered whenever you feel like you've wasted time and you're throwing a bunch of puzzle pieces together just to realize you don't like how they fit together aesthetically. Something that would help alleviate this issue would be something like a fly cam, essentially allowing us to float around the interior of the ship while creating it to see how everything looks after you put it together. On the simpler side, even something as simple as a screenshot to see what the interior looks like would be helpful, but Bethesda has gone above and beyond in terms of expectations with features like they did with the new map. A lot of people just wanted a simple map, but Bethesda just went ahead and did a full 3D render of each area, so it wouldn't surprise me if they went with the flycam option instead. Again, this would alleviate so much time and effort when it comes to building your ship, giving you more freedom to customize without having to jump in and out of more loading screens.
The Starborn powers allow you to feel more like a Mass Effect or Star Wars with force push, lift, time dilation, and so much more. Unfortunately, Bethesda by default has only allowed us to use Starborn powers every 15 to 20 seconds. This means if you're in a regular firefight on the ground, you may only use your Starborn power once or twice until all enemies are down in the field. And even with that, you are limited to switching between Starborn powers in a favorites control pop-up menu. If Bethesda set to map your Starborn powers to 2 different buttons on the controller, you could afflict enemies with the anti-gravity field and then quickly move to the gravity wave, pushing enemies across the map in just a few seconds and then filling them full of gunfire. But combos are impossible with long cooldown times. Here's what it looks like when you're switching between powers on the favorites wheel and going into the menu to select different ones, since your favorites wheel could be filled with other items. It can really slow down combat, which can be tactical, but takes away the creative combinations that you can do in other games like Mass Effect. Here's what it looks like when all of that has been cut out, and a mod that allows you to use your Starborn powers as often as you want.
I love the aesthetic of space fantasy suits, especially whenever it comes to the sleeker designs like we see in Mass Effect. Now I know that Starfield is going for more of a NASA punk vibe, which is straight from Bethesda's mouth, but this is giving us much more bulky, fluffy looking aesthetic with a lot of space suits with lots of tubes and a clunky look to what we ended up getting. A spacesuit variety option would be a great addition to Starfield, allowing us to take pieces of different armors in the game and put them together however we want and color them however we want. Bethesda games have slowly started moving away from individual cosmetic equipment for many years now. I remember back in Morrowind, we used to be able to have chest piece, greaves, pants, shoes, boots, shirts, and you could combine all of these together however you'd like. And now with Starfield, we are just relegated to one outfit that covers the entire body and a helmet. The groundwork is already laid out when it comes to customization with spacesuits. It just needs to be a little bit more user-friendly. Even now, whenever we are customizing our spacesuits, it's just a plus percentage stat here and there with no real cosmetic changes to make us feel like we have our own unique version of one of the default suits in the game. Going to the armor crafting bench in Starfield leaves a lot to be desired, and just like with the ship customization, it would be great to have more of a visual representation of what we are actually changing. So hopefully this is something that we could see, because right now we only have 3 cosmetic slots when we could have so much more.
Exploring the galaxy in Starfield is best with a companion, and most people are traveling either with the blonde, pretentious Sarah Morgan or the moody Andreja. Each character has their own civilian gear and spacesuit, and equipping them with this gear is an important part of your adventure. Unfortunately, for almost 2 years, Bethesda has left one critical part of equipping your companion unfixed. In the menu system, when you go to equip Sarah Morgan with a new outfit, and you're playing as a male character, it'll be you, the male character, trying on that shiny new dress. Instead of showing your companion character trying on the new gear, you won't get to see what the gear looks like on your character, whether it be Sam, Andreja, Sarah Morgan, or whoever. This is a simple fix that Bethesda needed to add before launch, and still has never addressed it. In fact, there isn't even a mod available to see what your companion looks like in the menu when you're equipping them with apparel.
During the development of Starfield, there was an early feature that was going to be in the game, and that was a fuel system. This would have made traveling through the galaxy feel like you're traveling, the risk of your ship breaking down, getting stuck, calling for backup. The beginning of Bethesda games are always so great, walking out into the open world after leaving the vault in Fallout or leaving the cave in Skyrim, and getting that sense of exploration for the first few hours of the game, knowing that you have to go to each location manually. But by the time you're a couple hours in, you end up pulling up your map and teleporting everywhere. This repetitive nature makes you fly through the game and get burnt out extremely quickly, especially in a game set in space, and you lose that sense of exploration that Bethesda games have done so much greatness with. Look at No Man's Sky. You can't go anywhere without using your ship fuel, landing fuel, and whenever you go to another planet or system, it feels like you actually traveled there. I think a simple fuel system would go a long way for immersive exploration in Starfield.
Starfield's space combat gameplay loop is very satisfying, but it's missing one key thing that other space fighters do so much better. And they need to add large, space station-sized starfreighters. Think of Star Wars large star destroyers, large hulking spaceships covered with turrets that you can fly over and around, taking down their defenses and eventually bringing these hulking monsters down and looting a massive amount of loot. Yes, it would be great if you could dock onto these just as you can in the regular game of Starfield, but entering into their shuttle bay with your ship and getting out and fighting on foot could be a huge gameplay loop that can be added fairly easily to Starfield's system. With Bethesda's Starship building mechanic, the team could build these large starfreighters and add them into the world as a combat loop or a randomized encounter and make emergent gameplay more exciting.
Now, this isn't a massive needed feature, but I think that every little change is worth mentioning. In previous Bethesda games, we've grown accustomed to the close-up and uncomfortable first-person camera while interacting with NPCs. However, there's one Bethesda game that excels in this area, and that's Fallout 4. Now, of course, Fallout 4 did feature a voiced protagonist, so it did make sense to have a character facing the camera during dialogue. However, even with mods removing the player voice, it is still nice to see our character engaging in conversation, even if they're just, standing there waiting for the next input to move dialogue forward. Now, Bethesda did update Starfield to allow you to switch to a freer camera during dialogue, which is kind of identical to how Skyrim did it, and I think it's great. But looking at other games in the RPG genre that have done great dialogue cameras, it does make you want to see more of your character, even if they're just idle. Bethesda does a great job at making you feel immersed in the world and that you're playing as you, but in a separate universe. Having the camera facing the player while choosing dialogue and switching to the character you're interacting with would allow us to see more of yourself in a different social light, rather than just the back of their head or in third person or their hands in first person. I know that there are some people who just prefer the first person dialogue, but to me, it's always felt super claustrophobic and uncomfortable. Bringing this to Starfield would add a tiny bit more cinematic flair and slightly spice up what is usually a boring social interaction. It might seem like a small thing, but hey, having a lot of small changes is something that would bring more life to Starfield.
This is Colt Eastwood. Thank you so much for checking out this video. So cool to collaborate with you again, Red, on Starfield stuff. We did a mod video a couple of years ago, and a lot of cool stuff in there as well.
Yeah, Bethesda is a playground for mods, so we know that everyone is always going to be updating the game with mods, but it was really fun to dive into some of the things that Bethesda could do, because we always want to have the features and updates directly from Bethesda over mods.
Do you really think that some of the things that we're asking Bethesda to fix are like a hope and a miracle to make Starfield become that potential that we know it can be?
I think all the things that we talked about were fairly reasonable. We're not asking for 1,000 more planets. We're not asking Bethesda to delete 1,000 planets and give us 10 like a lot of people wanted. These are actual features that could be, I think they're really reasonable, to be honest.
Something that we didn't cover in the video, like we're big fans of RPGs, and we're especially big fans of sci-fi games, whether it be Cyberpunk or Mass Effect, right? Those are like big parts of us as gaming fans. What were some of the things that when you play Starfield, you're like, oh man, I wish you could get a little bit of this from that game? Because I recently played a game not many people really enjoyed, but I'm glad I played it. It was Star Wars Outlaws, and I saw a few things in there. I'm like, oh man, like Starfield could have used some of this from sort of what people consider a mediocre game, and it might have elevated Starfield. What are some of the games that you want to like leech into Starfield to make it a little bit better?
Well, some of the things that we did talk about, and not to rehash everything, but definitely the interplanetary travel, just like Star Wars Outlaws does with the classic Star Wars, time loop whenever you're fast traveling. Absolutely love that. That's something that Bethesda could work into their own universe. Doesn't have to be, the time loop fast travel tunnel that we get with Star Wars. But that kind of stuff, and also taking inspiration from Mass Effect. Of course, also the aliens. We love seeing different aliens, and I think that at the very least we could get more factions to sort of flesh out the world and give it more personality.
Yeah, we didn't cover that because we've talked a lot about that behind the scenes, how there's basically like a couple enemy factions, the Spacers, the Ecliptics, and then the Pirates. Like that's mostly, unless you make enemies with the other factions, like it's pretty limited. And yeah, I would like to see more variety. And I also like when you talk about the aliens, it gets a little bit old fighting space crickets when you could be fighting like, people like from Thane's race from Mass Effect, or the Turians or something like that. And I feel like maybe Bethesda didn't want to copy what Mass Effect does, but you could copy some really great things and make your game just a little bit better.
It would be very difficult for Bethesda to do a time jump before doing a sequel, so having aliens introduced is sort of tricky, but at the very least they could have factions with different cultures, like a smuggler faction, and a thieves faction, and an assassin faction. We already have the Trackers Alliance that's been introduced, so hopefully they keep adding into that, as I talked about in some of my topics.
Like taking note from like Skyrim, like kind of bringing the Skyrim stuff that people love and bringing that into Starfield, but that could be a big ask to bring in whole factions when they're just doing an upcoming DLC. Like, I don't know, Shattered Space really kind of burned them. And you and I I wasn't a big fan of Shattered Space at all.
Shattered Space was, for me, it was sort of bittersweet because I loved what they were doing, and I thought to myself, what if they did 5 Shattered Space size DLCs and continued to flesh out the universe, except they weren't $30 each time? What if they were free updates or $5? You know what I mean? Because what Shattered Space did very well is it added more personality, added new culture to the universe of Starfield. And if they
and color,
yeah, it was so diverse. It was totally unique from everything that we saw in vanilla Starfield. So I always said, I wonder if they just kept doing this and added another big settlement on this other planet, added another settlement on this planet, and they just kept doing that. Eventually, you have this really dense universe in Starfield, and there's so much quality there. People wanted more things to explore, so I feel like that would be a step in the right direction.
The big question is, how much time do they need to spend to further improve Starfield and kind of keep supporting that game? Because there's still a lot of people who've played it over the years, but they need to be working on Elder Scrolls 6. How much more support do you think they need to put into Starfield? Is there another DLC they need to be on the way, or just fix some of these things on our laundry list today?
Bethesda really, like I said, just needs to flesh out the world bit by bit, adding more and more to the universe. A lot of things in this video I compared to No Man's Sky, because No Man's Sky sort of is the main example that people use as the comeback kid story, just adding free updates. No Man's Sky is it's not even the same game at all from what they did, and that was with good faith and free updates. No one can argue the quality of No Man's Sky now, love it or hate it, but that game is a massive universe now with so many things that are fleshed out. Bethesda could take note from this by just over time adding things to the universe that make it feel more alive, because one of the biggest issues that people had with Starfield is it feels empty. It feels like I can't explore like I do with a Skyrim and a Fallout. Like I land on a planet and there's nothing there, you know. And to that I always say, it is space, but to be fair, there should be more, you know, things to find, you know. What is it called, the 12-second,
there's like a 30-second loop that, you know, like Halo uses, like a 30-second loop of gameplay, and that gameplay loop that you and I talk about from Fallout 4 that is missing in Starfield, the gameplay loop of exploration, gathering loot, building and leveling up and killing enemies and doing combat, like all of that works in a nice cadence in Fallout and in Skyrim and Elder Scrolls, but it has been pared back quite a bit in Starfield. And when you covered like more variety in Outposts and so much more for combat and exploration, it can fix a lot of things for Starfield. But I can't wait to see what they have next, and the big reveal for what their content and improvements and updates should be something to look forward to for Starfield fans, and maybe those people who are wondering, should I get into Starfield now that it's coming to other platforms?
Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you ended up enjoying this video, don't forget to leave a like at the least and a sub at the most. We'll see you in the Starfield.
You can subscribe to both our channels by clicking the link in the description. This video is also on Red's channel if you want to go support him, and if you watched it on his channel, you can go over to mine, Colt Eastwood, where you can check out more news about Xbox, PC games, RPGs, and so much more. And as I always say, please be nice.